It would seem like a simple matter that if one is chosen to manage something for someone, the one chosen would endeavor beyond all other pursuits to make clear all matters relating to the thing being managed. That seems rudimentary. Moreover, it would seem that those whose histories have been stained by the inhumanity of slavery and institutionalized racism, which was characterized by voicelessness, would work assiduously to ensure that they do not thrust on others what they and their forebears were victims of. That too seems rudimentary. I shall promote the proposition that the absence of transparency and accountability is the root of all national evils. And I hope to offer concrete steps we might take to address that vexing problem. I shall confine my comments to three broad areas: the meaning of the terms transparency and accountability, the effects of the absence of transparency and accountability, and finally, how we might bring about a greater level of transparency and accountability. Before examining those three areas, I wish to offer a few thoughts about governance and democracy. Alan Moore wrote these words: "People should not be afraid of their government. The government should be afraid of the people." I agree with Alan Moore. I believe that governments are afraid of people, the people they govern, when transparency is the order of the day, and governments are made to account expeditiously for their wrongdoings. Implicit in a democratic governance is the notion of substantive engagement, not just at election time, engagement by the media and the citizenry at large. Real engagement cannot happen in the absence of transparency. At its core, the ideal of democracy is that the collective wisdom of the governed is far greater than the government's. Hence the need for information. Moreover, true democracy implies that temporary power is entrusted to people who are expected to conduct the country's affairs in the interest of the governed and to be held to speedily account where that is not the case. I think it is important to distinguish between transparency and accountability, because often the terms are wrongly used interchangeably. And beyond that, sometimes it is incorrectly assumed that accountability necessarily follows transparency. That is often not the case in developing countries in particular, and is most certainly not the case in the Bahamas. For a properly functioning democracy, which we do not now have, it is essential that we have transparency and accountability. But what are they? What do we mean when we use those terms? Transparency is a condition in which the governments and government-related entities' policies and actions are made visible and understandable to citizens. However, simply providing information is not good enough. The information must be accurate, it must be timely, and it must be relevant. Accountability means that public officials are answerable for their actions. That is to say, there are consequences for their actions. Transparency and accountability have a number of goals, including discouraging, detecting, and prosecuting individuals for corruption, strengthening institutions, leveling the playing field, and promoting trust in government and overall citizenry engagement. That leads me to my second area of consideration: why transparency and accountability are essential. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, penned these words. He wrote a memo, and I'm going to quote quite extensively from that memo at this time. I think I could not possibly have written it any clearer than he did. And this is what he said: "My administration is committed to creating an unprecedented level of openness in government. We will work together to ensure the public trust and establish a system of transparency, public participation, and collaboration. Openness will strengthen our democracy and promote efficiency and effectiveness in government. Government should be transparent. Transparency promotes accountability and provides information for citizens about what their government is doing. Information maintained by the federal government is a national asset. Information maintained by the federal government is a national asset. My administration will take appropriate action consistent with law and policy to disclose information rapidly in forms that the public can readily find and use. Executive departments and agencies should harness new technologies to put information about their operations and decisions online and readily available to the public. Executive departments and agencies should also solicit public feedback to identify information of greatest use to the public." President Obama recognizes the value of information and the importance of making the presumption that the people, all of the people, not only those who request or apply for the information, that all of the people who want to have the information. Now, to this question of why transparency and accountability are relevant, one of the things that we must all appreciate, and I think that you would all agree with this, that most of the major religions, in fact, perhaps all of the major religions, including Christianity, teach that man is inherently depraved. Despite that, we are constantly in this country in search of a good man, a Moses, if you will, to lead us from the grips of corruption, cronyism, and ineptitude. It won't happen. It's never happened. We don't need a man. We need a system. We need systemic changes. We must rely on systems and not people. Now, I can hear exactly what you're thinking. What comes first? The man or the woman, or the system? Well, I believe the system either makes the man or the woman or keeps him from doing evil, and the people, the civil society, makes the system. Yes, indeed, contrary to what today's politicians appear to believe, transparency and accountability ought to be of benefit to them. Not only do they help to engender integrity in governance, they also help to build confidence by the citizenry in government. Currently, anecdotal evidence suggests that the Bahamian people have no trust in their government. The economic impact of a lack of transparency and accountability is huge. It bleeds into government finances where deficits balloon because of padded contracts awarded in the dark of night, and where receipts take on wings and fly away. Where transparency and accountability exist, there is a greater likelihood that government entities will be more efficient and there will be fewer opportunities for shakedowns. Such a level playing field will necessarily result in improvements and general efficiency. For example, getting responses for new projects in a timely manner and responses for work permits and those kinds of things. National productivity will also increase. That's why this thing is so important. But how do we bring about transparency and accountability in our Bahamian context? The first thing we must have is a strong civil society. What the College of the Bahamas is doing today and what the organizers of this event envision doing in the days ahead should not be minimized. I would encourage all of us who are laboring and have labored under the rays of the sun, with apparently little to show for our efforts, truth be told, not to be enticed by the invitation of the masters to drop our baskets and take up the trays in the big house. Enticing, yes, but trust me, it won't work. It need hardly be said that freedom of information is long overdue. I have a few comments regarding the current bill. Firstly, we should all agree that everything government does ought to be viewed with a degree of healthy skepticism. Let's lay that on the table. We should always ask these questions at a very basic level. Why are they doing this? Why might this not be beneficial? What rights are being taken away? What new powers are being given to the government? We should be careful not to create a circumstance in which the government actually has either practical or legal reasons not to disclose information in a timely fashion. Let's also ensure that we are not ultimately putting the cat to mind the chicken coop. I believe that there are lots of good things in the Freedom of Information Bill. However, at its core, it is reactionary rather than proactive. That is so because apart from basic information pertaining to the objectives and functions of public entities, citizens will be required to request information. In this information age, that should not be the case. Information should automatically be made available. We should not approach freedom of information as one would have pre the information age. And I believe that's what we're doing. The accent of freedom of information should be the requirement of government to issue specific relevant information within clearly defined periods or face specific harsh consequences. That's where the action should be. The accent should not be on how one applies for information and exceptions, though those should indeed apply. But what else might we do? I know that time is running away from us. We might strengthen the Auditor General's office. We need more resources for the Auditor General so that he might do even more than he's currently doing. I believe we should have a public prosecutor who's not appointed by the government, someone who is elected, someone who is not afraid to deal with government officials. Because you can have all the laws in the world, you can have as much transparency as possible. But if there are not going to be any consequences, you can just forget it. We must require the government to show its full hand now. You see, we're at an interesting period right now. I think we have an opportunity to require the government that if they wish our support, to show their full hand now. Enact legislation now. Put the necessary policies in place now to cause there to be a transparent and accountable environment. But what of the opposition? I think we should require them to do some things as well. We should require them to introduce legislation as well and to clearly state what their policies will be upon taking office. Ultimately, perhaps this is how it ought to be. That we must fight for a properly functioning democracy. Perhaps. Well, I wish to commend to you these words in Scripture, which have eternal application, but I borrow for this purpose. And let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. Thank you very much.